They might still be alive.
Welcome to Horror and Crime, Deep Secrets, where the darkest enigmas meet the sharpest questions. Today, we unravel a tale that left an entire town paralyzed by fear. A story of cryptic letters foretelling crimes that no one could stop and no one can explain. In the early 1990s, the quiet, unsuspecting town of Westwood, nestled in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, became the center of an extraordinary mystery. For months, handwritten letters arrived at residents' homes, each predicting a sinister event. Events that unfolded with chilling accuracy. The sender's identity? An impenetrable mystery. The motives? Equally baffling. Who wrote these ominous letters? How did they know such precise details about the crimes that would follow? And most unsettling of all, why did the trail of clues lead to nothing but dead ends? Decades later, this case remains a haunting puzzle, leaving unanswered questions that grip the imagination of true crime enthusiasts and investigators alike. In this episode, we'll dive into never-before-discussed leads and examine theories that stretch from the logical to the extraordinary. You'll hear the story through the voices of townsfolk who lived it, the investigators who chased shadows, and the families left shattered by events foretold in chilling detail. As we begin, keep one thing in mind. Some puzzles aren't just unsolved, they're designed to stay that way. The year was 1992, and Westwood seemed an unlikely place for terror to strike. A small, idyllic town nestled against the Appalachian foothills. It boasted a close-knit community where neighbors knew one another by name, doors were left unlocked, and secrets rarely lasted long. The kind of town where time seemed to stand still, untouched by the chaos of the outside world. But beneath its postcard-perfect surface, a subtle tension simmered. The local economy, heavily reliant on a struggling timber industry, had begun to falter. Job losses created quiet desperation, with families scraping by to make ends meet. This underlying unease would soon take a darker turn, as cryptic letters began to surface in mailboxes, shaking the town's fragile peace. It was a time of transition. The 1990s brought new technologies and changing values that felt alien to the older generations of Westwood. Satellite dishes dotted a few rooftops, and the local diner now had an internet cafe sign, a novelty then. These small glimpses of modernity clashed with the deeply traditional, almost insular, way of life the town had known for generations. This cultural shift, while subtle, created fertile ground for mistrust and unease, emotions that would amplify once the letters arrived. Among Westwood's 2,000 residents, a few names stand out in this chilling narrative. Sheriff Gerald Langley, a stoic, no-nonsense lawman nearing retirement, would become the reluctant face of the investigation. Langley was respected, but his approach to law enforcement leaned heavily on instinct and old-fashioned grit, traits that would prove both assets and liabilities in the unfolding chaos. Then there was Evelyn Hart, the town's unofficial historian and librarian, who took it upon herself to document every strange detail as the letters arrived. Her meticulous journals, preserved to this day, remain a key resource for piecing together the mystery. And finally, we meet the victims themselves. Though their names were initially withheld to protect grieving families, their stories would soon become an inseparable part of Westwood's collective memory. A young mother, a retired schoolteacher, a drifter passing through, each targeted in a way that defied coincidence. Westwood streets were lined with century-old clapboard houses, their paint peeling in the Appalachian humidity. The surrounding woods, dense with evergreens, seemed to press against the town's borders, their dark interiors both comforting and foreboding. A single railroad track cut through the outskirts, a faint whistle punctuating the stillness at regular intervals. Even the weather seemed to conspire with the unfolding mystery. That summer, an unrelenting fog clung to the hills, obscuring visibility and lending an almost cinematic eeriness to daily life. Residents would later recall how the air itself felt heavier, as if carrying the weight of some invisible menace. In hindsight, there were warning signs, unusual whispers in the town square, strangers spotted at the edges of the woods, and anonymous phone calls that ended in static. But at the time, these were dismissed as the harmless quirks of small-town life. No one suspected that something or someone had begun to lay the groundwork for an enigma that would consume Westwood for decades to come. And then, one humid morning in July, the first letter appeared, its contents as enigmatic as its origin. It was a quiet disruption, unnoticed at first. But as the letters multiplied and their predictions began to come true, the town's tranquility unraveled, revealing the cracks beneath its serene surface. It started with a single envelope. In July 1992, the town's postmaster, Harold Grady, stumbled upon an oddity during his routine sorting. The envelope bore no return address, just a cryptic note scrawled in black ink. It was delivered to a resident on the north end of town, a retired schoolteacher named Martha Calloway. Inside was a brief but unsettling message. You'll hear the scream before the light fades. At first, it seemed like an odd prank, perhaps a child testing the boundaries of good sense. But when Martha Calloway was found lifeless in her garden 2 days later, her death officially ruled as an accident due to a fall, rumors began to spread. The vague prediction in the letter now carried sinister weight. Within weeks, more letters began appearing. They arrived sporadically, targeting seemingly random residents. Each contained cryptic warnings, some written as riddles, others as blunt statements. One note read, "Look for the broken gate under the third star." Another declared, "Two will go missing before the frost." The messages became a grim reality. A gate in the town cemetery was found smashed the day before an attempted grave robbery. 2 teenagers vanished on their way to a high school football game in late October, their whereabouts still unknown. Each event matched the timeline and peculiar phrasing of the letters. By mid-November 1992, the letters had become a source of public terror. Between July and November, July 10th, Martha Calloway receives the first letter and dies days later. August 1st, a second letter warns of a shadow on the hill, coinciding with a fire that consumes an abandoned barn on the outskirts. September 15th, the phrase "a red river runs" precedes a local river being stained red from illegal chemical dumping. October 22nd, the cryptic warning about 2 missing before frost is fulfilled when teenagers Evan Brooks and Carla Reyes disappear without a trace. The community was now gripped by fear, every new letter sparking dread and speculation. Sheriff Langley and his deputies were quickly overwhelmed. They examined handwriting samples, interviewed every known eccentric in town, and even brought in external experts to analyze the letters. Forensics determined the paper was standard stationery sold at the local general store, but no meaningful fingerprints or DNA were recovered. Langley, under immense pressure, expanded the investigation. He combed through library records, phone logs, and even the purchase history of typewriters and pens. But every lead unraveled into nothingness. Meanwhile, the town grew restless, convinced the authorities were failing them. The local newspaper, the Westwood Sentinel, was the first to break the story, running a front-page headline, "Letters of Fear. Who was behind Westwood's mystery?" News outlets from neighboring counties soon picked up the tale, and within weeks, reporters swarmed the streets, cameras rolling and microphones thrust forward. Residents, eager to share their experiences, recounted seeing unfamiliar figures lingering near mailboxes at odd hours. Some described the sound of footsteps in the fog or shadowy silhouettes slipping into the woods. One resident claimed to have seen a masked figure leaving a letter in the dead of night, but the description was too vague to offer much help. The media attention only fueled paranoia. With every interview aired or headline published, more theories circulated, and trust within the community began to erode. Several details defied explanation and deepened the mystery. The letters were always delivered through the official postal service, meaning they entered the system undetected. The handwriting was consistent but erratic, as if deliberately altered to avoid identification. No 2 recipients had any obvious connection, yet the letters accurately foretold events that required intimate knowledge of the town. More chilling still, some letters hinted at crimes that were never made public, suggesting that the sender had either inside information or a disturbingly prophetic understanding of Westwood's underbelly. By late 1992, the town was left grasping for answers. Who could possess such detailed knowledge of the town and its secrets? How did the letters manage to predict events that seemed impossible to foresee? And most importantly, was this the work of a single individual or something far more sinister? As the investigation deepened, law enforcement discovered new fragments of evidence, but the picture only became murkier. Missed opportunities and overlooked details would come to haunt the case, creating a legacy of frustration and unanswered questions. Sheriff Langley's investigation faced immediate roadblocks. The lack of tangible evidence meant the case relied heavily on circumstantial details and gut instincts. Early forensic analysis of the letters, handled by the state crime lab, revealed frustratingly little. The paper, a generic brand sold widely in the region, yielded no unique identifiers. The handwriting appeared deliberately inconsistent, as if someone had practiced various styles to obscure their true penmanship. Even advanced chemical analysis of the ink failed to narrow down its origin. One promising lead came in October when a postal worker reported seeing a man loitering near the mail drop box on Main Street late at night. The man's face was obscured by a hood, and by the time authorities arrived, he was gone. Despite the description, no one matching the profile was ever identified. As public fear grew, so did speculation about who might be behind the letters. Several residents came under scrutiny. One, James Jimmy Corbin, a reclusive local handyman with a history of erratic behavior. Corbin had recently been fired from a carpentry job, and neighbors claimed he had a grudge against the town. His home was searched, and while stacks of old newspapers and scribbled notes were found, none matched the style of the letters. 2. Margaret Lewis, a retired schoolteacher and amateur poet. Margaret often mailed letters to pen pals and had a peculiar fascination with riddles. Her handwriting was analyzed but did not match the mysterious notes. Still, her eccentric personality kept her under the public's watchful eye. 3. An outsider. Some believe the culprit was not a local, but a transient or someone with a vendetta against the town. This theory gained traction after a traveling salesman was arrested for theft in a neighboring county. However, no evidence linked him to Westwood's mystery. Each suspect was thoroughly investigated, yet none could be definitively tied to the letters. Every trail seemed to circle back to the same confounding question: how could someone operate with such precision yet leave no trace? The investigation suffered from several glaring oversights and lost opportunities. Ignored witness statements. At least 3 residents reported seeing an unfamiliar vehicle, a rusted brown pickup, circling neighborhoods where letters were later delivered. This lead was never fully pursued, as law enforcement lacked resources to track down every unregistered vehicle. Unsecured evidence. A key letter, left on the desk of a deputy for analysis, was accidentally discarded during a routine office cleanup. Unfollowed technology leads. In the early 1990s, law enforcement lacked access to the digital tools we take for granted today. A review of local phone records or surveillance from the post office might have yielded critical clues, but such measures were either unavailable or deemed unnecessary at the time. Psychologists brought in to consult on the case suggested the sender exhibited traits of a highly organized yet deeply disturbed individual. Their knowledge of the town and its residents hinted at someone who had lived in Westwood for years, blending seamlessly into the community while harboring an intense, secretive agenda. Criminologists proposed that the letters might have served a dual purpose: warning and manipulation. The sender could have been testing the town's response, gauging how easily fear could be sown among neighbors. This psychological game, playing puppet master to an entire community, added another layer of complexity to the case. Frustrated by the lack of progress, some residents took matters into their own hands. Evelyn Hart, the town librarian, organized community meetings to compare notes on the letters. Her detailed records revealed curious patterns. The handwriting changed subtly over time, and the letters often contained phrases pulled from obscure poetry or folklore. Despite her efforts, None of these connections led to actionable evidence. Online forums would later revive interest in the case, with true crime enthusiasts proposing wild theories and sharing their own analyses of the surviving letters. Yet even with modern resources, no one has been able to crack the identity of the author or their motives. As the investigation faltered, the town turned to speculation. Rational theories vied with the fantastical, each attempting to explain how one person, or something else, could orchestrate such an elaborate scheme. These theories, though compelling, only deepened the mystery. Among the more grounded hypotheses, two stood out as plausible explanations for the letters and the events they foretold. 1. A grudge-fueled agenda. Some investigators believed the letters were the work of a disgruntled resident with intimate knowledge of Westwood's social fabric. The writer may have targeted individuals they resented, using their familiarity with daily routines, personal disputes, and local gossip to construct the eerily precise predictions. The seemingly random selection of victims, however, posed a problem for this theory. If the crimes are personal, why were the connections between the targets so obscure? 2. An opportunistic outsider. Others speculated that the writer was an outsider, possibly a drifter or former resident with a vendetta. This theory gained traction due to the sporadic timing of the letters and the lack of a clear pattern in victim selection. If the sender had no fixed presence in town, it might explain why they avoided capture. Yet the precise details included in the letters, such as intimate knowledge of local landmarks, suggested otherwise. 3. Psychological angles. The psychological profile of the letter writer became a focal point of discussion. Criminologists suggested the sender exhibited signs of narcissism and control. By predicting events that would later unfold, the writer placed themselves in a position of power, toying with law enforcement and the public alike. Another possibility was that the writer sought attention and validation, using the letters as a way to carve out a twisted legacy. This would align with the careful crafting of cryptic messages and the theatricality of their delivery. But if attention was the goal, why remain anonymous for decades? 4. Community rumors and local lore. As fear and frustration mounted, rumors began to swirl around the town, blending fact with fiction. Some claimed the letters were part of a coordinated hoax, perpetrated by a group of pranksters who relished the chaos they created. Others whispered that the letters were warnings from a reclusive hermit who lived deep in the Appalachian woods, watching the town from afar and using the letters as a way to warn or punish its residents. These stories often relied on embellishment, but they underscored the pervasive unease that gripped Westwood. 5. Paranormal and conspiratorial theories. For those inclined toward the supernatural, the letters represented something far darker than human malevolence. Some residents spoke of an ancient curse tied to the land, pointing to local folklore about vengeful spirits who communicated through cryptic messages. Conspiracy theories also found fertile ground. A small but vocal group argued that the letters were part of an elaborate psychological experiment conducted by shadowy organizations or rogue government agents. They cited the eerie precision of the predictions as evidence of access to advanced surveillance or behavioral data, a chilling thought in its own right. 6. Online sleuthing and modern takes. Decades after the case went cold, the internet breathed new life into the mystery. Forums and true crime blogs became hotbeds of speculation, with amateur detectives dissecting the surviving letters for hidden codes, linguistic patterns, or connections to unsolved crimes elsewhere. Some proposed that the writer was a failed novelist or poet, channeling their creativity into a macabre project. Others pointed to advances in forensic linguistics, suggesting that a modern analysis of the letter's syntax and vocabulary could identify the sender. Yet, for all their efforts, the online community remains as baffled as the original investigators. Each theory presents compelling arguments but falls short of providing definitive answers. The rational theories explain much of the behavior, but fail to account for the lack of evidence or capture. The psychological angles offer insight into the writer's motives, but raise questions about how they evaded detection for so long. The supernatural and conspiratorial theories, while intriguing, struggle against Occam's razor. What do you think? Was this the work of a brilliant yet disturbed individual, an elaborate group effort, or something far stranger? Share your theories in the comments below, and let us know what you would investigate if given access to the case files. Even as theories abound, the most compelling developments came years later. New evidence, heartbreaking revelations, and unresolved contradictions that continue to haunt Westwood. Stay tuned as we uncover the twists that only deepen the enigma. Years after the letters stopped, new details emerged that reignited public fascination. In 2007, during routine renovations at Westwood's post office, workers discovered a hidden compartment beneath the sorting table. Inside were several undelivered letters, all bearing the same handwriting as those that terrorized the town decades earlier. One of these letters contained a chilling message. The final chapter was never written. The discovery sparked a renewed investigation, with forensic advancements offering tools unavailable in the 1990s. DNA analysis of the envelopes revealed partial genetic material, but it failed to match anyone in the national database. While the find was tantalizing, it left more questions than answers. In 2015, the family of Evan Brooks, one of the two teenagers who disappeared in October 1992, made a public plea for information on the case's anniversary. Evan's younger sister, now in her 40s, described how the family had been haunted by the lack of closure. "We just want to know if someone out there remembers something, anything," she said. "The not knowing is the worst part." Despite advances in technology and an outpouring of online support, the disappearance of Evan and Carla Reyes remains a heartbreaking mystery, with no evidence ever found to suggest their fate. Several key inconsistencies continue to baffle investigators and amateur sleuths alike. The timing of the letters. Some letters arrived mere hours before the events they described, raising questions about how the sender could predict such precise details. The lack of motive. While fear and control appear to be motivating factors, the absence of any direct communication or demands from the writer leaves a gaping hole in the case's narrative. The silence after 1992. Why did the letters suddenly stop? Did the sender move, die, or simply tire of their twisted game? Each of these points deepens the enigma, suggesting either extraordinary foresight or an as-yet unexplored explanation. In 2018, a private investigator hired by the Brooks and Reyes families uncovered what seemed like a promising lead. A former Westwood resident had anonymously posted about the case in an online forum, claiming to have seen something on the night the teenagers disappeared. Attempts to trace the user failed, and the post was later deleted. This fleeting hint only added to the frustration of those searching for answers. Was it a genuine lead or just another dead end? The more one examines this case, the more the questions multiply. If the letters were merely predictions, how did they achieve such accuracy? If the sender had first-hand knowledge of crimes, why not reveal themselves and take credit or blame? And, perhaps most hauntingly, did the town miss its chance to stop the events foretold? The compartment at the post office, the DNA on the envelopes, the vanishing forum post. Each piece offers a fragment of truth while obscuring the larger picture. As the decades pass, Westwood struggles with the weight of these unanswered questions. The final chapter may never be written, but its lingering mysteries still hold the power to unnerve and captivate. Up next, we'll reflect on the lasting impact of this case and invite you, our audience, to weigh in with your thoughts. For the residents of Westwood, the shadow of the letters still looms large. The unanswered questions have become a part of the town's collective memory, whispered about in quiet corners and passed down to new generations. Families of the victims, like Evan Brooks and Carla Reyes, carry the weight of uncertainty every day. Meanwhile, the discovery of undelivered letters and the cryptic phrase, "the final chapter was never written," has left a lingering fear. Was the sender truly finished, or is there more to come? The case's enduring mystery continues to attract the attention of true crime enthusiasts and amateur detectives, each hoping to uncover the missing piece of the puzzle. But with no new leads and time eroding the trail, the likelihood of closure grows slimmer with each passing year. Westwood's story serves as a haunting reminder of how a community can unravel under the weight of fear and mistrust. The letters were more than predictions. They were instruments of division, eroding the bonds that once held the town together. Even today, the scars they left are visible, both in the lives of the victims' families and in the collective psyche of a town that may never find the answers it seeks. What do you think happened in Westwood? Could the letters have been part of an elaborate hoax? Or were they the work of someone with a chilling gift for foresight? Share your theories in the comments below. Your insights might just shine a new light on this enduring mystery. If you found this story as chilling as we did, don't forget to subscribe to Horror and Crime for more unsolved cases and haunting enigmas. Turn on notifications to make sure you never miss an episode. Coming up in our next episode, we'll explore another baffling case that defies explanation. A young woman murdered in her locked apartment with no sign of forced entry. Join us as we retrace the final hours of her life and unravel the forensic puzzle that continues to baffle even the most seasoned investigators. Behind the locked door, the unexplained murder on Maple Avenue. See you next time, where the line between truth and terror continues to blur.